Welcome to the Last Economy podcast, the guide to the age of intelligent economics. Today, we are opening up Chapter 8 of the book, which it calls The Mind of a Civilization. And if you've been following along, you'll know we spent the last few deep dives really tearing down the old dashboard, GDP.
Yeah, the one the book basically calls criminally insane.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because it counts destruction as growth. It's completely blind to, actual wealth. The foundations.
Right. So after all that demolition work, the big question, the one we're tackling today is, okay, if GDP is so broken, what should we be measuring? What's the right dashboard look like?
What actually tells us if a system like a civilization is healthy and going to stick around?
That's the mission. We're moving from critique to architecture, really, looking for what the book calls a compass for sanity.
A compass for sanity. I like that. Something that points towards survival, not, off a cliff.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And we're going to lay out the 4 forms of wealth. They're interdependent, the book argues, and they determine if any complex system, a whole civilization, sure, but also a company, even your own life, is actually thriving or, well, if it's dying.
Okay, that sounds critical. Yeah. But let's start with some context. The book kicks off with this observation about how measurement itself can go wrong. It's kind of terrifying, actually.
It really is. It's this recurring historical trap. Civilizations don't usually fail because they stop measuring stuff.
Right.
They fail because they get obsessed with measuring the wrong stuff. Things that are easy to count, maybe, or things that prop up the current power structure.
And they miss the big picture.
They totally miss the underlying capacity, the foundations. Think about it. The Babylonians, their big measure was barley, right?
Yeah.
Trade volume.
Masters of the transaction.
Yeah, masters of flow. Then you had the Egyptians meticulously tracking Nile flood levels. That was the measure of their material base, their agriculture.
Made sense for them.
And later, the British Empire. It was all about naval tonnage, colonial resources coming in, measuring their reach.
Okay, so each one measured what seemed most important at the time.
Exactly. The barley, the floods, the ships. These metrics perfectly captured what mattered to them. But, and this is the kicker, they were completely blind to the other forces gathering, the things they weren't measuring.
Like what?
Well, the Babylonians didn't measure long-term soil health or, the threat of invaders with better tech like iron. The Egyptians got locked into the Nile's predictability, ignoring climate shifts, political changes around them.
And the British missed.
They missed the rise of things like intellectual property, the shift towards oil, the American industrial engine, things their tonnage metrics just didn't see.
Which leads us straight to the first really stark quote from this chapter.
Yeah.
It crystallizes this whole historical blindness thing. Let me read, quote, "Each civilization's measurement system perfectly captures what matters to it right before it kills them."
Oof. Yeah, that hits hard, doesn't it?
It really does.
And that's the starting point for this whole chapter. It's not just a clever historical quip. The book argues it's about physics.
Physics? How so?
Think of it like a river. If you only measure the water flowing in the river, the volume, the speed, the GDP equivalent.
The transactions, the throughput.
Right. You're completely ignoring the health of the riverbed itself, the structure that contains and directs the flow. And the riverbed, that's the capacity for transformation, for persistence. It's the underlying capital.
So the old economy just measures the water.
Pretty much. It measures flow, income, transactions, because it's rooted in scarcity, extraction. The new economy, the intelligent one we need, has to measure the capital, the resilient foundation that lets the flow continue, regenerate, adapt.
We need to measure the riverbed, not just the flood, moving from quarterly thinking to centuries.
Exactly. Measuring persistence, which means we need ways to measure this foundational capital, even if it's not generating an immediate, obvious transaction.
Which brings us to that fascinating example you mentioned earlier, Costa Rica, a real-world pivot.
Ah, yes. Costa Rica in 1948. It's a fantastic illustration of how a society can almost unconsciously start valuing different things. After a short civil war, they did something utterly radical for the time.
They abolished their military. Permanently.
Permanently. Imagine the geopolitical thinking back then. Everyone probably expected them to be invaded or just fall apart.
Yeah, seems like a huge risk.
But what actually happened was this massive system-wide reallocation. Money, energy, land. It all shifted.
How so?
Well, the funds that bought tanks, they went into schools, into teacher salaries, the human energy, the expertise for training soldiers. It started training doctors, improving healthcare.
And the land.
Military bases became national parks. Systematically, they started implicitly, measuring different outcomes. Literacy rates went up, health improved, and crucially, they started valuing environmental health, forest cover, biodiversity.
They saw the forest itself as wealth, not just the lumber they could sell once.
Spot on. They realized a functioning, regenerating forest provided way more long-term value. Clean water, tourism, carbon storage, you name it, than just liquidating it for quick cash. They started valuing the riverbed, not just the flow of timber trucks.
So it wasn't about GDP growth in the short term. It was about systemic health, resilience, persistence.
Precisely. They began cultivating, whether they called it this or not, a balanced portfolio of national wealth. They understood that sacrificing, say, their environmental health, their material capital, as we'll call it, for a quick buck, was basically civilizational suicide.
And their stability and success since then kind of proves the point, doesn't it?
It's a powerful demonstration. It shows why we need a framework that measures balance, not just throughput, which leads us directly to that framework.
Okay, well, let's get into it. From the necessity to the actual architecture, the book lays out these 4 distinct, interdependent forms of capital needed for any system to last. The MIND framework.
Right. MIND, material, intelligence, network, and diversity. And it's not just a handy acronym. The book links these directly to those 3 laws of a living system from the previous chapter.
Flow, openness, and resilience.
Exactly. These capitals are the measurable ways systems embody those laws. They're the physical necessities for fighting off entropy, that universal slide into disorder and decay.
Let's break them down. Starting with the first 2, M and I, which seem tightly linked to that law of flow. So material capital M. My first thought is just money, resources, stuff.
And that's the common misconception. The book defines it much more precisely. Material capital isn't just stuff. It's organized matter and available energy in useful configuration.
Organized matter, useful configurations. Okay, unpack that.
It's the physical expression of the law of flow. For matter to be capital, it needs low entropy. It has to be ordered, structured, capable of doing useful work.
Give me an example. Like, why isn't a pile of rocks M capital, but maybe a bridge is?
Good one. A pile of rocks is mostly raw material, high entropy, disorganized. A bridge, though, takes those materials, organizes them with intelligence, and creates a structure with a specific, useful function enabling flow across a barrier. It embodies organized matter in a useful configuration.
Okay, so the organization and usefulness are key, like the microchip example the book uses. Sand versus a chip.
Exactly. Sand is raw silicon dioxide, pretty disorganized. A microchip. That's highly purified silicon, etched with incredibly complex patterns, immense intelligence applied to matter. It's M capital because it's organized matter in an extremely useful configuration for processing information. A factory is maybe M squared compared to just a pile of bricks because of the embedded intelligence.
And the book uses the Incas here to illustrate smart N capital management.
Yes, the agricultural terraces. Masterful engineering. They took steep mountainsides, basically unusable land, and transformed them into highly productive, sustainable agricultural platforms.
Organizing the land, controlling water flow, preventing erosion.
Right. They created durable material capital that fed their civilization for centuries. They weren't just measuring acres, they were measuring the long-term productive potential, the viability of that organized landscape, ensuring the physical base could sustain the flow of food.
Which contrasts sharply with the modern mistake, the GDP trap.
Oh, absolutely. The book really hammers this. We measure taking finite resources out of the ground, oil, minerals, old-growth forests, and count that depletion as income, as GDP growth.
We're confusing liquidation with profit.
Totally. It's like selling the floorboards of your house to buy food and calling it an increase in your household income. GDP goes up, but your actual wealth, your material capital, your ability to persist has just plummeted. That's the core failure in how we measure M now.
Okay, that's M. Let's move to I, intelligence capital. If M is the organized physical stuff, I guess I is the knowledge, the patterns.
Precisely. Intelligence capital I is the system's pattern library. It's the accumulated know-how, the ability to solve problems, recognize patterns, anticipate the future, create value that lasts. Think science, skills, cultural wisdom, technology blueprints.
And the book stresses something unique about I capital.
Yes, it's the only form of capital that actually grows when you share it. Giving away knowledge doesn't deplete your own. It potentially enhances the whole system's intelligence. It's the intellectual side of the law of flow.
But hang on, in today's world, we're drowning in information, right? Data everywhere. Doesn't that mean our I capital is maxed out?
That's the trap. We confuse sheer volume with useful architecture. The book uses the Library of Alexandria as a cautionary tale.
The ancient world's Google, basically.
Right. It wasn't just a pile of scrolls, it was an organized system for learning, research, sharing knowledge. A hub of iCapital when it burned. Well, humanity lost more than just documents.
Like the Resico for Roman concrete?
Yeah, that's one stunning example. The practical knowledge to make that incredibly durable concrete was apparently lost for something like 1,000 years. It shows how fragile iCapital can be if its structure is destroyed.
So just having data isn't enough.
Not even close. The real measure isn't terabytes of data. It's the capacity to learn, to adapt, to synthesize that data into actionable wisdom. If we just have disconnected facts we can't process or apply, we're doing what the book says, drowning in data while starving for wisdom. Real iCapital needs structure, organization, and the ability to update that structure.
Okay, that covers M&I, the flow capitals.
Yeah.
Now we shift to the infrastructure that supports persistence, N and D. Let's start with network capital, N. The book links this to the law of openness.
That's right. Network capital N is all about the connections. It's the trust, the relationships, the quality of the communication channels that allow the other capitals M, I, and D to flow smoothly without friction.
So high-end capital means things work efficiently.
Yeah, transaction costs plummet, information travels reliably, people can coordinate easily for collective action. Think of it as the social infrastructure.
And why is this tied to openness and fighting entropy?
Because the second law of thermodynamics tells us any closed system inevitably decays, right? Slides into disorder. Openness, bringing in energy and information, exporting waste, is physically necessary to counteract that. Network capital is how a system maintains that vital openness. It's the structure of the connections.
The book uses Venice as a prime example of N capital in action, building an empire on trust.
It sounds almost quaint, but yes. Venice built its incredible trade dominance largely on the strength of its network capital. In a really treacherous medieval world, a Venetian merchant's word, their reputation, was literally as good as gold, anywhere from London to Cairo.
How do they manage that?
It was institutionalized. Breaking your word wasn't just a personal failing or a financial risk. It meant exclusion from the network. And for a merchant, being cut off from the Venetian trading network was often a commercial death sentence.
So the network itself enforced the trust.
Exactly. The network was the security, the enforcement mechanism, even a form of currency. They understood implicitly that high trust minimizes friction and maximizes the flow of everything else: goods, money, information.
Okay, so that's historical high-end capital. What's the modern mistake the book points out?
Well, this is where it gets really pointed about our current technology. The book argues we've built platforms, particularly social media, that are essentially attention extraction machines. Meaning their core business model relies on capturing and holding your attention to sell ads. And the platforms quickly learn that certain emotions are really effective at grabbing attention.
Like outrage, fear.
Bingo. Outrage, polarization, fear, these are cheap, reliable ways to generate engagement, clicks, shares, comments. But by optimizing for that, for maximum short-term engagement,
They damage something deeper.
they systematically shred the very social trust and genuine connection that makes up real network capital. They create echo chambers, amplify conflict, and make cooperation harder.
Wait, so you're saying platforms literally called social networks might be destroying the actual network capital of society?
That's the argument. They're liquidating the underlying N capital, our ability to trust each other, to cooperate for short-term profit, measured in engagement metrics and ad revenue.
Wow. Okay. That's quite an indictment.
It's measuring the noise, the flow of outrage, while ignoring the decay of the civic riverbed, the trust itself.
Okay, moving to the final capital, diversity capital D. The book calls this the system's option portfolio and links it to the law of resilience.
Diversity capital D is basically the system's insurance policy against surprises, against the unknown future. It's the variety of approaches, perspectives, solutions, and possibilities that a system maintains.
So it's not just diversity for diversity's sake.
No, it's diversity as a physical requirement for resilience. It creates options. It's closely related to what Nassim Taleb calls anti-fragility, the quality of systems that don't just withstand shocks but actually gain strength from them. D capital provides the raw material for adaptation.
And the ink and potato story illustrates this perfectly, doesn't it? Compared to, say, bananas today.
The contrast is incredibly sharp. The global banana industry is famously vulnerable, right? It's largely a monoculture, one main variety, the Cavendish, optimized for looks and shipping. So when a disease hits that variety...
The whole system is threatened. We've seen that happen.
Exactly. Now compare that to the Incas in the Andes. They cultivated something like 3,000 different varieties of potatoes. 3,000.
Why so many? Seems inefficient.
But it wasn't about quarterly export efficiency. It was about long-term survival. If a blight or a drought wiped out the potatoes in one valley, chances were high that different varieties, adapted to slightly different conditions in the next valley over, would be perfectly fine.
They built in resilience through variety.
Precisely. Their diversity capital was immense. It made the entire system incredibly resilient, anti-fragile even, to localized shocks. Maintaining all those varieties wasn't overhead. It was a crucial investment in persistence.
But how do you measure the value of a potato variety you hope you never need? That's the challenge for our current metrics.
You've nailed it. D capital's value often only becomes obvious after a failure, which makes it hard to justify in a system obsessed with short-term measurable gains. The Incas optimized for persistence. We optimize for efficiency.
And a modern mistake is?
Trading away that robust anti-fragility, that vital redundancy and variety for the illusion of short-term optimization. We streamline supply chains to be just in time. We consolidate industries. We favor monocultures.
Making everything hyper-efficient but also super brittle.
Exactly. We eliminate backups, diverse perspectives, alternative ways of doing things, all in the name of cutting costs or maximizing immediate output. Then when a shock hits a pandemic, a war, a ship stuck in a canal, the whole fragile system shudders or even breaks. We forgot to value our diversity capital.
Okay, M-I-N-D. We have the 4 capitals. Now comes what feels like the absolute core of this chapter, the mathematical relationship between them.
Yes, this is the linchpin. The reason the framework is so powerful and, frankly, so demanding. It's about how these capitals interact.
And the crucial insight is they don't just add up.
No. If it were additive, you could potentially compensate for weakness in one area, say low trust, N, by just having massive amounts of resources, M, or brilliant tech, I.
But that's not how it works.
Not according to the book and not according to the underlying physics, it argues. The relationship is multiplicative.
This is where I need to read quote 2. It's short, but it changes everything. M, material capital, I, intelligence capital, and network capital, D, diversity capital. These 4 capitals do not add, they multiply.
M times I times N times D. Think about what that means mathematically.
It means if any one of those factors is 0, the whole result is 0.
A total system failure. And even if a factor isn't absolute 0, but just really, really low, say 0.1 or 0.01.
It drags the entire product down drastically.
It guarantees systemic fragility or collapse, regardless of how high the other numbers are. You could have M, I, and N all at a perfect 10, giving you 1,000. But if D is only 0.1, your total system vitality plummets to 100. If D is 0.01, it crashes to 10.
It's like that string of Christmas lights, right? One faulty bulb, the whole string goes dark, there's no compensating. Balance isn't optional, it's mathematically mandated.
It's an unforgiving geometry. The old economic thinking often operates under this additive fallacy. Oh, we're damaging social trust a bit or reducing biodiversity. But look at our technological growth. That'll make up for it.
But the math says no.
The math says that's a recipe for accelerating collapse. You can't fix a deficit of trust by inventing a faster widget. You need to fix the trust.
Okay, let's apply this multiplicative logic. The book uses the Soviet Union as a stark case study.
It's almost a perfect, tragic illustration of the principle. If you look at the USSR through the mind lens.
Material capital.
Huge, vast territory, immense natural resources, massive industrial base, powerful military. M was arguably very high.
Intelligence capital.
Also impressive. World-class scientists, engineers, mathematicians, pioneers in space exploration, nuclear physics. High I.
Okay, high M, high I. Looks good so far. But then
you get to N and D, network capital N. Trust, open communication, reliable information flow.
Poisoned. Pervasive state surveillance. Censorship. Deep mistrust between citizens and the state, and even among citizens. A fundamentally closed system, actively fighting openness. N was incredibly low, near 0 in many aspects.
Right, and diversity capital D. Variety of approaches, perspectives, resilience through options.
Systematically crushed. Central planning enforced monocultures in agriculture, industry, and thought. One ideology, one way to run a factory, one approved perspective. Alternative ideas weren't just discouraged, they were often eliminated. D was also near 0, so you have high M times, high I times near 0, N times near 0 D.
And the result? Systemic failure. The multiplication by near zero in N and D rendered the strength in M and I ultimately irrelevant for long-term persistence. The book argues it wasn't just a political or ideological failure, it was a failure of system geometry, a violation of the physics of living systems.
That framing geometry physics makes it feel less like opinion and more like an objective diagnostic.
That's the goal of the framework, to provide a non-ideological tool for assessing the fundamental vitality and persistence potential of any complex system.
And that's the perfect segue because the book makes a huge point that this isn't just about civilizations or countries. This mind framework, its scale invariant, it applies just as much to us as individuals.
Absolutely. The same underlying physics, the same multiplicative logic governs the health and flourishing of a human life as it does a nation. We often fall into the same trap trying to maximize just one thing.
Like money, or career status, or maybe social connections, the things the old economy tells us to measure.
Right. But genuine human flourishing, that subjective feeling of a life well lived, the book argues, comes from cultivating a balanced portfolio across all four personal capitals.
And it explicitly warns against the unbalanced profiles that emerge when we over-optimize one at the expense of the others. This brings us to quote 3. A flourishing human, like a flourishing civilization, does not maximize one of these capitals. They cultivate a balanced portfolio.
Let's walk through those unbalanced types it describes. First, someone who goes all in on material capital M.
The person with all the toys.
Yeah, maybe achieves great financial success, big house, fancy car, but their health is failing. Low personal M. They stopped learning or adapting years ago. Low I. Their relationships are shallow or transactional. Low N. Their portfolio is like high MX, low IX, low NX, maybe medium D. Lots of stuff, but isolated, unhealthy, maybe spiritually empty.
Okay. What about maximizing intelligence capital?
The brilliant, isolated expert, think of the stereotypical genius academic, super high I capital in their specific field, but maybe they neglect their physical health, low M, or socially awkward or lack deep connections, low N, and are completely rigid, unable to adapt if their field changes, low D. Rich in knowledge, poor in flow, connection, and resilience.
Makes sense. Then there's the network capital N maximizer.
The ultimate social butterfly, the influencer who knows everyone, high-end, vast network, always connected, but maybe lacks deep skills or knowledge, low I, or financial stability, low M. Their connections might be wide, but not deep. They're great at facilitating flow, but when the network needs actual substance from them, they might not have it.
All connections, no core strength.
Something like that. And finally, the diversity capital D maximizer.
The dilettante.
Exactly. The person who tries everything, flits from passion to passion, takes every course, explores every option. They have immense D-loads of possibilities, very adaptable, but they never commit enough to build substantial material wealth or deep intelligence, mastery in any area. They lack the focused M and I needed to have real impact or flow. They're resilient, maybe, but lack substance.
Wow. Seeing it laid out like that, it really highlights the need for balance.
It's inescapable, the book argues. Whether you're managing a country or managing your own life, the logic holds. Flourishing isn't about maxing out one score, it's about consciously tending to all four. Your physical health and environment, M, your learning and adaptability, your deep, trusting relationships, and your openness to new experiences and perspectives, D.
It reframes self-care and personal growth, not just as nice things to do, but as like physical imperatives for a resilient life.
That's a great way to put it. It's the physics of persistence playing out on a personal scale.
Okay, this has been a really rich, deep dive. We've moved from dismantling the old GDP dashboard to constructing this new mind framework. Let's try to boil down the core argument of this chapter.
The single-sentence summary. How about this?
Civilizational health is not measured by the throughput of transactions, but by the multiplicative balance of its four interdependent capitals: material, intelligence, network, and diversity.
Perfect.
All right. And the key takeaways from the book's chapter 8 would be, first, those old metrics like GDP, fundamentally blind. They measure destruction as growth, confusing liquidation of our foundational capital, our planetary balance sheet with income.
Second, the real wealth of any system built to last, a civilization, a company, isn't just its cash on hand, it's its capacity to transform, adapt, and regenerate. That's the M&D portfolio. That's what fights entropy.
Third, and this is the big one, that relationship is M times I times N times D. It's multiplicative, which means a zero, or even just a near zero, in any one category leads to systemic failure. Balance isn't just nice, it's mandatory.
And fourth, this isn't just abstract theory. It scales down. Our own human well-being, our vitality, our ability to thrive through life's challenges is directly tied to how well we cultivate that balanced portfolio of M, I, N, and D in our own lives.
Okay, so we've defined the four capitals, the architecture of a persistent system. But that sets up the next question, doesn't it? How does value actually move between these capitals?
Exactly. We have the structure, now we need the dynamics, the flows.
Which is the perfect setup for our next deep dive. Next time, we're tackling Chapter 9, The Three Flows, The Blind Scholars, and the Elephant. The book promises to reveal a kind of secret history of economics.
Yeah, it argues that capitalism, communism, Austrian economics, they all saw part of the picture. They each understood one type of flow, maybe.
But they were all catastrophically incomplete, like
Yeah.
the blind man feeling different parts of the elephant.
Precisely. Chapter 9 aims to turn on all the lights and let us see the whole animal with three distinct necessary flows of value for the very first time.
I'm looking forward to that one.
And maybe a final thought for listeners to chew on until then. If this mind framework holds true, if your health, relationships, knowledge, and options are all real forms of capital,
Yeah.
then every choice you make isn't just a simple action. It's an investment or a divestment in your personal mind portfolio. Deciding whether to learn something new or nurture a friendship or take care of your body, these aren't just lifestyle choices. They're fundamental capital allocation decisions with real consequences for your long-term resilience and flourishing. That's something to mull over.